And everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got wind advisories out that kick in tomorrow for the Alaska range here, all the way in, even into the western areas, and also for the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, Eagle, and those areas down to mostly west of Tok, along the Alaska Highway in this zone here. And that's for gusts tomorrow through tomorrow night, Monday and Monday night. The 45 miles an hour from the south and southeast. Alaska range through the passes. Look for those winds again for tomorrow and tomorrow night to be at or even above 60 miles an hour. Moving on to satellite imagery, you can see upper level low slowly moving off to the east now. Kept chilly air, temperatures below freezing, eastern north slope on out to the Arctic coast, and light precipitation fell in the form of snow. Some areas had upwards of 2 inches. Sagwan had 2/10 of an inch of water equivalent precipitation. I believe that all fell in the form of snow up there. Otherwise, much lighter amounts elsewhere. And then the band of moisture trailing into the Tanana Valley, that brought a fair amount of rain, upwards of third to half an inch of rain today to Chattanooga and over toward Chena Ridge, with about 1 to 2/10 falling in the Fairbanks area. And then let's see, St. Mary's had about 2/10 of an inch with this in the trailing trough back to the west there, while Flat had nearly 1/4 of an inch. And tonight, all you can also see here, the clouds streaming northeastward into southern Kodiak Island there after a pretty nice day, at least to start, and into the afternoon, but the high clouds spreading over the area with actually rain probably right at this time making it onto the south coast. Rain did make it up to Sandpoint and Chignik, with Chignik reporting 1/10 of an inch this afternoon, and probably more than that, upwards of 1/4, even 1/3 falling at Sandpoint. And the low center back in here developing, and good thick cirrus spreading across Bristol Bay this afternoon, but some sunshine breaking out here. South central Alaska allowed temperatures to rise into the lower 60s at Anchorage today, and that tied the record high for this date. I forgot when it was set last, but anyway, it tied the record for this date. And the only place that had a warmer temperature than 61 that we had in Anchorage was up there at Eagle, and they reported 63 degrees this afternoon with a few breaks in the clouds there. Otherwise, along this trough, as I mentioned, the heavier rainfall and more numerous showers extending back to the west and southwest. Then a break right through here again across Bristol Bay, with a lot of high-level moisture streaming northward as this system deepens and pulls northward, and that's going to bring some gale force winds into the area with it, and eventually up across the western Gulf. Kodiak gales tonight with rain. Back to the west, not really much going on, just clouds, patchy areas of fog, and widely scattered showers. Unalaska had a little bit of that going on today, but very light amounts. And Atka, Adak, Shemya, I didn't see any reports of precipitation at those stations today. Light fog, or light snow, actually, with fog, eastern Arctic coast there, and into the north slope, and then rain back with the trough south of the mountains up through the northeast. Some good clearing back to the west there across the northern Koyukuk out to the northwest part of the state, and rainfall with this front. Up to 2/3 of an inch fell today in the 12-hour period at 3 p.m. at Petersburg. Juneau picked up about 1/3 of an inch, while Sitka had 1/2 an inch of rain. So finally some soaking rains getting into those areas after the dry period you've had for a while. But back to the northwest, tapering off to scattered showers and ending there. Sun breaking out Yakutat along the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and even up into portions of the Copper River Basin. For tonight, this system deepens, pulls northward across eastern Bristol Bay. Gale force winds and rain, heavy at times, will hit Kodiak Island tonight and spread northward into southern Cook Inlet and the southern Kenai Peninsula. Winds will be on the increase here across south central Alaska, turning an arm, and the Chugach Mountain Range, as well as the Alaska Range. We'll see an increase in the wind as rain spreads northward into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Drying out, that system finally pulling off to the east, but lingering light snow and fog there, at least into this evening, and then by midnight should be over. And showers also moving out of the area of the panel, getting kicked out by this incoming warm front. That tomorrow will bring some rain, heaviest over in the northern areas, lighter down to the south. And then the system moves northwards. Look for the strongest winds across southern Alaska to occur late tonight and early tomorrow morning, or during the morning hours on Monday. And of course, that'll last longer, expected to last all day long there in the Alaska Range and the upper Tanana Valley tomorrow night, and actually until Tuesday morning for the winds up in those areas, as the system will weaken considerably by that time. Otherwise, tomorrow, westerly winds, look for some afternoon clearing there for Kodiak Island as the showers end and get restricted back to the west with this trough. Rain, fog, breezy conditions, kind of cool on the temperatures, but not too bad here for the areas from the Alaska Range all the way back to the Kuskokwim Mountains. Maybe breaking out or becoming lighter, but probably won't see much in the way of any clearing out here along the southwest coast or the Bering Sea for that matter. Up to the north, best chance of clearing will occur North Slope and Eastern Brooks Range, Copper River Basin areas, but clouds will be streaming northeastward throughout the day, and a couple of troughs out over the eastern Bering Sea. That'll keep chance of showers, little clouds, fog, definitely IFR in areas there, and also with this trough here as it exits the central Aleutians. Look for a better afternoon than overnight tonight and tomorrow morning, and kind of showery, cloudy, and foggy there for the Fox Islands. And calm, or a lot drier and a lot less wind out over the western Aleutians, but considerable low clouds with areas of fog. Same thing on the Arctic coast. Now we have a dry day tomorrow, but low clouds and fog along the coastline. Could see some clearing in over the North Slope. And then for Tuesday, that system, actually the low center becomes this trough right here, and the older low center drifts up into Kotzebue Sound, and the front just really washes out, leaving a little bit of moisture in the form of clouds and scattered showers there from the Koyukuk Valley back down into the eastern North Gulf Coast, across the eastern Copper River Basin. Sunshine breaking out here, south central Alaska. Look for a mostly sunny day on Tuesday. Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, maybe Kodiak Island, and then high pressure controlling the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Much stronger system way out there to the west. Otherwise, just a chance of some showers and rain along that trough axis from the Yukon Delta up into the Koyukuk Valley area, Kobuk Valley, and then off to the northeast with chance of rain or snow on the northeast side of that. That'd be around, well, it'd be north of Eagle over toward Old Crow. Another warm front spreads rain into the southern southeast coast during the day. Light rain, fog, and drizzle slowly spreading northward to maybe the central areas by the afternoon. Low temperatures tonight down that way, 45 to 50, otherwise 25 to 30 for the Arctic coast. Lower 20s in the Brooks Range, and 40s over 30s and 40s over the central and southern interior. And then the highs tomorrow, 30 to 35 eastern Arctic coast, near 50 there at Kotzebue, upper 40s and lower 50s over the southwest interior, mid 50s here south central Alaska, the downsloping winds, and 55 to maybe 60 if you're lucky there in the Panhandle. And then the lows the following morning, about the same here in the 20s north of the Brooks Range, or from the Brooks Range north, 40s near 50 in the Panhandle, 40s southern Alaska. Highs in the afternoon, 30s Arctic coast to 55 to maybe 60 over the Panhandle and south central Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic showing a lot of IFR here, central Bering Sea down to the Aleutians, into Bristol Bay, as well as a fair way into portions of the southwest interior, on up into the Seward Peninsula. IFR Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, into Prince William Sound, and marginal over toward Yakutat, and then IFR pretty well locked in over the Panhandle. Some IFR here, east central interior, as well as the central and western Arctic coast. Tomorrow afternoon, still a lot of IFR here for the Panhandle, Yakutat, up into the southern coast range there, or the southern Wrangles, and also back here from the Alaska Range and across the Kuskokwim Valley to the Nulato Hills. IFR Bristol Bay westward, but east of the Pribilofs now, north to the Bering Strait, central western Arctic coast in the IFR zone with some VFR there along the Brooks Range and the North Slope, as well as the eastern interior and the lee side of the Alaska Range. And for the morning on Tuesday, IFR North Slope Arctic coast, some VFR back into the northwest here, Kotzebue Sound, Noatak Valley. Otherwise, a lot of IFR here in over the southwest interior, northward Galena, and then taking off to the northeast. We still have some VFR though for the 40 Mile Country, upper Tanana Valley, IFR, much of the Panhandle, marginal VFR for the North Gulf Coast, and then VFR breaking out here east side of Kodiak Island and into the Gulf of Alaska. Big batch of IFR coming into the west, associated with the next system that progresses slowly eastward here, but stays west of Adak. Otherwise, marginal VFR right up into the western, southwest, into the central interior, northward, becoming IFR over the north slope and the central Arctic coast. IFR still hanging in here over much of the, well, about the southern 3/4 of the southeast coast, marginal up toward Link Canal, Glacier Bay. Marginal VFR, southern Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound. Looks like this is Sitna Valley. And then just east of the Alaska Range here, all the way back to the west. Anaktuvik, both Anaktuvik and Atigun, VFR tomorrow with, Lake Clark and Merrill. Occasionally IFR, especially on the eastern approaches. And for Rainy, marginal VFR to start, becoming IFR as that moisture spreads northward. And for windy, VFR becoming marginal in the afternoon, especially on the southern approach. And for Isabel, marginal VFR becomes IFR. Also from Intesta, downward trend, but not too bad. Starting out VFR and some marginal VFR, mostly southern entrance in the latter part of the afternoon. Tanita, occasionally marginal. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR to start, becoming IFR as the day wears on. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 to 4,000 feet here, just near and south of the Brooks Range. And then you come all the way down to the North Gulf Coast here into the Panhandle at 6,000 feet. Kind of a cool pocket here over the Alaska Peninsula, that upper level low slipping northward, pulling in a little bit cooler air from the west, but 6,000 to 8,000 feet, Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle. Icing, all the moisture coming up, but with that system lifting northward. So we've got an area of considerable moderate along the North Gulf Coast, northern Prince William Sound, possibly the Talkeetnas, and also areas some enhanced with the cross-barrier flow here. Could see some areas of considerable moderate rime icing along and just west of the Alaska Range, and then areas, isolated areas all the way back out to Kuskokwim Bay. And then this area here, that's kind of the first surge of moisture lifting northward. It won't be as significant. And you could see some over the Panhandle as well. That'll be above about 7,000 feet. And looking at the jet stream, this upper low tracking northward here. Good jet south, 130 knots, south-southwest, coming over the top of the ridge, even 90 knots there. And at 9,000 feet, a couple of lows. This is the original one kind of backing back out to the west. This one's the one coming northward with the strong winds later tonight into south-central Alaska, 35 to 40 knots, and maybe even high as 50 knots coming into the Alaska Range there. 30 knots, winds increasing over the northern Panhandle, 3,000 feet southwest 40 Kodiak Island, 45 knots into the North Gulf Coast, 15 to 20 for the Panhandle. Easterlies up to 25 here on the north side of that system, but lighter toward the Arctic coast, and pretty light winds there over the Aleutians. Turbulence, moderate chop, a sure thing here for the Alaska Peninsula, especially Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, south central Alaska, right up to the Alaska Range. This area increasing in the afternoon, spreading into the northern Panhandle. After the break, I'll return with a look at the marine forecasts and the ice edge.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the Sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the Sun doesn't stay at the Sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the Sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. And this is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from the space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, very similar to yesterday, not really a lot of change. Still have this slow ice growth going back here along the more northern ice field. And this one sort of just in the stationary status quo, and expected to stay that way throughout much of this upcoming week, at least through midweek. And for coastal water forecast, west-southwest 15 knots on the south coast here of the Panhandle, light southeast for Clarence Strait, picking up to about 15 Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories, Lynn Canal, south 25, seas 5 feet, south to southwest 20, 7 to 8 foot seas on the north coast. Outlook for Tuesday, those come down westerly 10 to 15 knots, but seas still hanging at 8 feet all the way down the coastline. That means small craft advisories. Inside waters, south 15 knots, Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, and winds south of 20 for Lynn Canal. For tomorrow, big winds here coming up, especially during the first half of the day, 40 knots out of the south. Good gales. I can't remember the last time I saw a 40-knot wind forecast for Cook Inlet, but we got one out tomorrow. It sees 10 feet north of the Forelands to 17 to 19 feet down toward Kachemak Bay. South 35 for the Barren Islands. 30-knot winds out of the south with 19-foot seas for the western North Gulf Coast, southeast 30 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, seas of 4 feet, and 7-foot seas forecast in Prince William Sound with 30-knot winds. And then those come down to 15 knots on the day Tuesday, southwest 15 for the North Gulf Coast, seas 9 to 10 feet, and much lighter winds now for Kachemak Bay and the Barrens, west 15, 5 to 7 foot seas. Small craft advisories now. Still a breezy day there for Cook Inlet, south to southwest 25. And for Bristol Bay, that low lifting northward, look for gale force westerlies to follow it in behind at 35 knots. And those will become southwest 30 for the Alaska Peninsula right up to Sitkinak. And full gales for Kodiak Island, southwest 40 to 45 knots, seas approaching 20 feet. And then that drops off considerably for Tuesday, west Shelikof Strait at 15, north 15 there, the east side of Kodiak, northeast 20, south coast of the Alaska Peninsula, north side, Bering Sea side north at 10, Bristol Bay west at 10, seas coming down to 4 feet. Western Aleutians, central Aleutians, northwest 15 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet, and about 5 feet here for the central Aleutians, turning westerly for Unmak Island, Unalaska Island, a little more wind, especially on the north side there, 25 knots out of the west. And then for Tuesday, those go northerly, 15 to 20, north to northeast, 15 to 20 to the west there. Adak and Atka, real light winds, north 10 to 15, high pressure. And then that system out to the west beginning to affect the area. That'll be west of Kiska, more Shimmy and Attu, in the Shimmy and Attu area coming up to 30 knots. For the southwest coast, west to southwest, west to northwest winds at 25 knots. Small craft advisories extend there all the way up to St. Lawrence Island with that north wind at 25. About like you saw today, with those gusts near 40 there at, or 30, 35 at Gamble today. Anyway, for Monday, northwest 15 to 20, Pribilof to St. Matthew Island. And then those winds will lighten up for St. Lawrence Island, come down under 25 knots, and 20 knots all the way down out of the northwest to Nunivak Island. South of Nunivak Island, west at 20, northwest 15, west 20 for St. Matthew Island. And up along the central eastern Beaufort Sea coastline, east 15, seas 3 feet, east kick up to 20 knots, especially from Point Lay on down to about Cape Beaufort, and then they turn northeast and extend at the same speed all the way down to the Bering Strait. Outlook for Tuesday, northwest 15 here for the southeast Chukchi Sea, and then northeast 20 knots, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. No change for the western Arctic coast. And really not much change up here for the central and east side, down to about 10 knots on the central coast, east to northeast 15 on the east side, seas 3 to 4 feet. And for tonight, this area, light snow, fog, eastern north slope on out to the Arctic coast, slowly tapering off, hanging on this evening, then ending after midnight, drying out here over the interior as well, as this next storm brings gale force winds, rain heavy at times. A lot of moisture and wind coming up tonight in towards south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, western Alaska range tomorrow. Again, those gale force winds out for Cook Inlet and Barren Islands, with rain pushing eastward throughout the day along the North Gulf Coast, becoming heavy at times with the winds there as well, spreading in the rain that is into the Panhandle. Next day, warm front keeps it wet over the southern southeast coast. Sunshine, south central Alaska, narrow band of rain up over the interior, with dry conditions again for the north slope and out over the Bering Sea.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.